Okay, welcome to the Coach Hos podcast. And today, I'm out in sunny Florida again. Friday, Mike. You never know where I'm going to pop up with my backgrounds. This is an actual background. This is not a virtual background. This is actual palm trees and things like that. I was telling you guys off air as I was getting ready to set up outside. Three people decided that they wanted to picnic right where I was going to set up. So while I'm doing this, I'm trying to figure out a good spot for me to sit down and continue. But today we hit a freaking grand slam, Mike. We hit an absolute grand slam. This is like a year and a half in the works. We've tried in and out to get her on. We kind of did a little sneak peek about it on one of my stories. Erica Suter she's also in Florida. She is a All-American. She's a Hall of Famer. She's a two-time publisher, which we were talking off air about, which is like completely impressive. Like I can barely read a book, let alone write them. So she's written two already. She's in the same exact wheelhouse that we're in. And I've been following this girl, and I said this to her. Uh, I've been following her since she was in Baltimore, and I probably since Instagram had started, and just watching her grow and watching all the things that she's doing. I was telling her, I'm just like, I'm like a proud dad. It's just so great to see these things happening. And especially for the females, like our business is 85% female athletes, right? And on top of that, female soccer athletes, because of where we were or where I was in Pennsylvania, where you are now, it's a hotbed for soccer. There's other sports going on there, but that's the hotbed. So, I mean, I could just ramble on and on and on, but without further ado, I want to welcome the fit soccer queen, Erica Suter. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I know it's been a lot trying to plan this podcast, but we made it and I'm excited to talk today.
We made it. And I know that Mike has got a ton of questions. Him and I just did a podcast last night on pelvic floor, and that was very interesting. I had really, again, kind of like as we talked about it, thought it was more about females, and here come to find out it's just as common in males as it is in females. But today we're going to talk ACL, we're going to talk strength training, we're going to talk all kinds of things, and it's going to be geared again toward the female athlete. No bias to the guys here, but some of this does pertain to them. But for the most part, this is where we want our female athletes to really listen to what this woman has to say today. I mean, we tried for a year and a half to do this, so we're gonna get the most out of this one. So kind of give us a little bit of background on how you got to where you are now, and what you did growing up.
I started playing soccer when I was 5 years old, and I just naturally fell in love with it and just had this pure joy for the game. And I think that's probably because I grew up playing recreationally until about high school. So nowadays, you see a lot of really young kids enter the travel system, but I didn't enter the travel system until I was like 13, 14 years old. So I was able to have a childhood with a lot of different activities. I tried ballet and gymnastics. I played a little bit of lacrosse, and I also had a brother, and I played with his friends growing up in the neighborhood, a lot of like baseball and tackle football and capture the flag and foursquare and tetherball and all these fun games from the 90s that we loved that really just developed us into really competent athletes. And so by the time I became a high schooler, I was so naturally talented at soccer from having all these athletic skills. And I said to my parents at that time, I'm now serious about this. I want to try out for a travel team. And when I went to those tryouts, I wasn't really nervous because I felt really confident in my athletic and soccer ability. And I ended up making one of the best teams in the state of Maryland, Bethesda Soccer Club. And I played with them for several years in high school when I was getting recruited to play in college. And I also did a lot of like strength, speed, and conditioning during that time. I actually had started that in middle school, continued all the way through high school, and also in college with the same strength coach as well. So I just became this well-rounded athlete, and that eventually took me to play soccer at Johns Hopkins University. And I actually turned down several Division I offers, and people thought I was crazy at the time. But for me, I really liked the team at Hopkins. I liked the culture and the traditions that they had, and I just wanted to go to a smaller school. And Coach Leo Weil at the time told me that I would be a starter as a freshman if I came in and worked hard, and he fell through on that. He followed through on that promise, and I started all 4 years and just had a fun career and really loved the memories with the team, and the rest is history. And now I coach full time, and I've been doing it for almost 11 years, and I mainly do performance training
Mhm.
because there's a huge need for that in the soccer world. I did do a little bit of skills training early on, but I started to realize I was overtraining a lot of the girls with a lot of what they had already had, and they weren't getting strong enough. So I switched and went back for my master's degree in exercise science and got my CSCS and just went full into the performance training side.
Wow. Oh man, Mike, where do we
Nice
start?
resume. Well, Eric, I listened to you on the Mike Boyle podcast that Joe sent me. It was like 2 weeks ago. It's actually driving up to get my taxes done, and this is a great time to just listen to this. And I told Joe, I was like, I feel like we're having a conversation with like replicas of ourselves because we've been preaching everything that you've been saying since we started to really get into this together, like right before COVID. And we started doing a lot of research about everything that goes into this whole ACL epidemic and all this. And we love doing this podcast because we love bringing on individuals like yourself who is just another voice to explain, and like your background there really warrants like your ground to stand on to talk. Because I feel that sometimes I think just some patients might think that I'm just saying stuff just to dupe them into making business. Like, let me just say this to scare them in to come in and just pay money for
Yep.
PT, point blank.
Yep.
And it's
Yep.
it's more than that. If all I wanted to do is just make money, I'd be doing something else. Trust me. PT it's hard work. It's a lot. I feel like there's a lot of coaching and just mental and physical and all the stuff that goes in with working with people. That you have to. It has to be more than just the money. And it's just such a dynamic, such a dynamic field that we're on. And just it amazes me too at just how this epidemic is continuing, and the numbers that we're seeing on the PT side, and the things that surgeons are doing to try to, maybe try to make these surgeries a little bit better and better outcomes. But the reality is these injuries are still happening. They're not slowing down. And really our youth kind of is, I feel like, in a bad spot. They can't even do simple things without like a major part of their body breaking. So, um, we just love to maybe start off hearing from your perspective as to like what are you seeing when you're training and you're working with athletes.
Well, in terms of the ACL epidemic, you're right. It has gotten worse across all ages. Whether you're a youth athlete or you're a professional women's soccer player who has access to all
Exactly.
these gadgets and gizmos and technology, and a sports science staff, and then a nutritionist, then a psychologist. Like, we would think that it's like resources that are causing the problem, but it's really like us not doing the basics. And
There
I've
it is,
talked
Joe.
to
Yep.
Dr. Tim Hewitt, who is like a pioneer in ACL
Yes.
research, and I mean,
Yep.
he's been around for a while. I think he
Yep.
has something wild like over 500 published papers in males and females. So there's no like lack of research in the female population. He's studied it, and
Mhm.
even he says that if female soccer players did strength training year round, at least 1 to 2 times a week, they could reduce ACL by over 50%. And
Wow.
at this point, I just tell people, look, like, nowadays strength training should be your bare minimum. A
Yep.
couple years ago and in like the early 2000s, people felt extra special. Oh, I'm doing strength training. But now it's like, no, this is like a non-negotiable bare minimum.
Right.
So we definitely need the strength training piece for female athletes, but once they get that down, then they should not think, oh, this is the magical elixir to reducing ACL. Just because you get in the gym doesn't mean you are bulletproof 100% of the time from ACL injury. So we have to be really honest about that. So that brings us to other things like nutrition, which I'm really passionate about talking about because there's a lot of misinformation,
Yep.
sleep quality, recovery, and load management is a huge part. And I was having a conversation with Donnie. He's the coach of University of Texas women's volleyball. They just won the national
Yep.
title last
Yep.
year. And we were just talking the other day, and he said he couldn't have said it any better. He said youth athletes nowadays are playing a schedule that is meant for 18 to 24-year-olds.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was like, that couldn't describe it any better, because we have kids who are not as strong as they can be, not developing a broad range of athletic skills as much as they can be. And we're putting them in this year-round environment that just catabolizes their muscles, and there's no room for rebuilding and just becoming a well-rounded athlete. So I think load management is a huge part of the problem too, because I've seen some of the strongest girls still blow their knee. And I'm sure you
Right.
guys have too. We've
Right.
always seen
Yep.
those athletes where we're like, wow, like they can deadlift so much, they can pistol squat really well, but they still get that ACL tear. And it's a load management problem, it's a nutrition and malnourishment problem, and it's an under recovered problem as well.
What do you think then? I think it was the women's Arsenal team, right? Didn't they have 3 ACLs? So
Yes.
at a level like that, with professionals around them, right? Load management. I mean, they know the color of the urine, right? I mean, they know everything about these athletes. Why not one, not two, but 3 on one team? Well, I mean, how do you explain that?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And I think just because there's a sports scientist on staff claiming that they're doing load management doesn't mean it's necessarily happening. And just think about it. I mean, that professional soccer schedule, we're fighting against all these giant stakeholders and then management, and like
Yep.
no one's actually changing the schedule. And I don't think
They're
the
increasing it.
yeah, exactly. And I don't think we're practicing true load management. I don't think enough sports scientists are being taken seriously or are respected at these clubs. And I have colleagues who work at the highest level. They're sports scientists, they're director of sport performance. And the amount of messages I get from them venting to me that they have no impact is a problem. So it's
Wow.
like they're not even utilizing these people.
Right.
It's just, management just doing their own thing, or just trying to, make money because we need to schedule as many games as possible. But I think people are like, oh, well, 3 Arsenal women tore their ACL. We need more resources for women. It's like, no, like we need people actually like doing their job and helping women within the club, because you have enough people on staff. Like you have
Clearly.
enough technology. You have your Nord boards and your GPS unit. Like you have everything. Like we need to take a step back and think, okay, what's going on with this schedule?
Do you think that, I mean, and this could go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but do you think that if we increase the size of the roster, allowing, like they're doing now, allowing more substitutions, which could, maybe mitigate some of the injuries? Do you think, like, even like I think that they were talking about that at the NFL level, maybe even increasing the roster, maybe 2 or 3 players, but even for like a soccer team, do you think that because that they're increasing the amount of games that they're playing, well, we maybe then need to have a few more players as our backup? Now, then I guess the other part of that is, do we water the sport down by bringing in, but I think that it also, allows more players, space to get onto a team. So, I mean, what is your take on that? Do you think that that would help the load management?
It could. It would definitely change like how much playing time is going on with the starters. But again, you would have to have a depth of a roster. And I think when push comes to shove, a lot of coaches will keep their starters in because they're like, wow, things are clicking. We got to win.
Right.
And you would have to have like studs on the entire 30 to 35 woman roster. So I think
makes sense.
It could work, but yeah, you would have to have like everyone be like really good as the starting lineup.
Right.
What do you guys think about just the language we use, like plastering on programs? Hey, we're doing this for ACL prevention. Like, do you think that's instilling more fear in our girls, or we should just kind of get them strong and not really talk about it? Like,
Yeah, I
I've
mean,
seen like
first
a
off, I
hesitancy.
don't use the word prevention. I got rid of that a long time ago. I call it, more of a injury reduction, but I try not to even use that because like we've all heard, like good training is rehab or prehab training, right? Like a good sound program is what I think a lot of kids are missing. I mean, when you talk to some of these kids or these athletes, them going to the gym is running on the treadmill for, a mile and a half or something at a steady state. And then they go and do abs and biceps and dips. I mean, that's not sports performance. I mean, first off, your energy system that you use didn't even, correlate to what you're doing. And now you're in the gym doing, crunches and abs and like, so they don't even understand, like what a program should actually look like. So I think to answer your question, I think not even using that, because it's bad enough that I think that we probably get accused a little bit of fear mongering when we try to tell the athletes that, what, honestly, at 10 months, you're a 15-year-old female that's never touched a weight before. At 9, 10, 11 months, you're still not ready to go back to your sport yet. Sorry. The objective data is proving this. And that was what I needed, because I was a strength coach as tier 3, right? You have a surgeon and a PT clearing these kids to go back to play. And then they get to me and they can't stand on one foot for 10 seconds. Like, who did the evaluation that said that you can be cleared to go back? So that, to me, Mike.
Yeah, that's where Joe and I started sifting through this. We met each other before COVID. We started talking about, okay, why are the re-tears happening? Why are they happening in the first place? And I tell all the kids, I'm like, look, your deficits are your deficits, so why don't we get to it before the ACL tears? The reality is when you hear high level is not dribbling a ball and then a major ligament in your body tears. That's not high level. I mean, your body's not resilient to a basic thing that you should be able to do as a kid. And I'm making my way through this large continuing ed course that's being hosted actually by it's down in Florida, in St. Nicholas Children's Hospital. They
Oh,
have
yeah.
they have a sports performance, and they're hosting this series. And there's a lot of things in the course that I'm already well versed on, but there's some really cool things they're talking about on just the statistics. And even though kids are playing more sports now, they're weaker than they were in the 80s. Your average kid cannot execute a lunge, cannot do a squat, cannot do pull-ups. Just the basic foundation level of the kids is less, even though genetically they're bigger. The boys are just bigger at a younger age. The girls are going, puberty's hitting earlier. They just don't have control of that body, and then they hit it's called a peak height velocity, like the growth spurt. So their body starts shooting out all over the place, and it's like the girls will grow tall, and then they have to kind of fill out into their frame, or the guys kind of grow weirdly. 1 week they're a little taller, one leg's a little bit shorter, and these coaches just continue to hammer them with just the sport, and there's nothing to kind of it's like a beanstalk growing, and there's nothing to kind of direct the way it's going. It's just a constantly tugging them in all these different directions.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's when we were kind of looking at is that the kids aren't doing foundational stuff. It's not like the 90s or 80s where we were outside playing and bike riding and playing manhunt and rollerblading and doing all this stuff. And we preach multi-sport, but we don't provide the bandwidth for the multi-sport. So it's practice here, it's game, it's tournament, practice the next morning. And I guess my question is like, how much do you practice until it's like overkill? Because I feel like the bucket is overflowing. Like, how much can we possibly do ball work? I mean, it's like bench pressing every day. Like, there's only so much the muscle could take. There's only so much that skill could take. Like, we got to do something else. So that's where I think our uphill battle is that you have coaches that, and Joe used a good analogy. It's like it started where you had some really good players, and then somebody didn't make that team, so somebody's dad started B team. Somebody didn't make B team, so somebody's dad started C team. And then now we have all these clubs. And when I talk to the parents and the kids that are like involved in it, I'm like, what is the difference? And they say, none. Like, why are you paying so much money? You got to pay for these cleats. You got to get all this special uniform with the names on the back, the bags, all this stuff. I don't understand like what the difference is. So there's all this competition together of just doing the same thing, but no club is taking a look at like what we do in human performance. And that's where we kind of started diving into a lot of the things like the sensor technology, looking at movement quality, things like the whoop strap that are starting to analyze like what the strain that's actually on somebody's body, all this stuff about nutrition and sleep, which I'm sure we'll get into, but all the things that allow you to perform and do the sport, nobody's dialing into that. It's just soccer, or field hockey, basketball, basketball. But there's none of this other stuff that makes you an athlete. And I would never consider competing in a competition without doing that foundational stuff. You know, it just, to me, it's common sense. But for them, they don't understand that. They think it's like, it's punishment because I'm making them do like these sets of lunges and squats. And I'm like, you guys need to understand that this is how you get better as an athlete. And this
Right.
is how you're going to get faster, and this is how you're going to basically perform well by being strong in these shapes and positions.
What if I told you, Erica? What if I said 2 mile test? What is your thought?
Okay, so I'll remind me to come back to that one because
Yep.
I
Okay.
do
Yep.
want to stay on the topic of youth and specialization because I am so passionate about this. And every year I'm in coaching, and I'm sure you guys can say the same. Each year it gets worse. Each year
Yep.
I have to fight a little bit harder to let people know that this is not the only way. It's not the healthiest and most effective way. And I even present all of the literature and people still don't listen. But to your question, Mike, specialization is usually over 8 months in the year in a single competitive sport,
Okay.
and that's the exclusion of other sports. So for the parent that says, well, what if they, play basketball with dad 1 hour a week? I'm like, well, that's not enough of a buffer, that 1 hour of basketball compared to that 6 to 8 hours of
Right.
soccer. That's not enough. And if you think back to our childhoods, I mean, we were out there for, my goodness, I'm going to say like
Hours.
6, 8 hours a day, like until
Yep.
the sun went down and our
Yep.
parents were yelling at us to come inside. And now it's like, okay, Johnny, like come outside in the backyard. We'll do a little, like an hour of play, which is better than nothing. That's great. As long as the kids are having fun, that's awesome. But that's not enough against the beast that is the amount of hours year round in a single sport.
Yep.
And the literature supports this. It supports how overuse injuries increase if sports over 8 months out of the year, leaving sport by age 12 or 13 because it's become too much of an obligation for the kid and it's no longer fun anymore. And it's just crazy when you present people with the research. And I'll tell you guys a story. So I am starting to see more and more like that 10 to 12-year-old girl range with injuries that
Yep.
80-year-old
Yep.
women are having. I've heard like a quad pull, a hip tear,
Yes.
and I've
Yes.
never seen this before until recent years.
In a
And
10-year-old, right? I mean,
in a
like
10 year
what?
old, and again, I look at their schedule. They play club in the fall, they practice with their club team in the winter and still do tournaments. Then spring is go time, so another soccer season. Then summer they're playing in a 3v3 league. So
Mm-hmm.
even if we're doing some play and some other sports within that, it's still not enough to balance out those hours. So
Right.
and yeah, I just keep seeing a lot of injuries happen that shouldn't be happening at those ages. And I try my best to speak my piece. And some parents are totally on board and they get it and they understand the evidence-based and practice-based research. But some parents are like, screw it. We think that travel ball for our 8-year-old, the number one team in the state where we're going to tournaments all the time, we think
Yep.
that's the best path for them. And they're picking the
Yep.
path for the child because that's what they think is going to get them ahead of their neighbor next door, when actually it's the opposite.
Yeah. Wow.
So it seems like it's almost like, and I even have parents that have their kids involved in sports that say this. It's like a money drive. It's this scare tactic of, if your kid is not involved, then they're not going to get playing time or they're not going to get seen. So it scares them. Well, I better sign up for Winter League then, because then they'll be able to get playing time in Spring League. So the coaches scare them to draw them into being in the sport all the time to get roster spots on their club. Look at my club. It's packed. There's like a waiting list. Like, I'm looking good, prestigious, and it's just driving them in to constantly be surrounded. So they don't give them any breathing room to go and do the other things. Or if you have a kid that says, look, I really love soccer, I love this sport, I love it, like I want to do it, we're having a hard time getting like coaches to understand, okay, like 3 hours of the same stuff that you just did on Monday, like how much can we possibly kick the ball? Why don't we dial that back down to maybe an hour of whatever field work you want to do? Then we're going to split up like certain lifting sessions or certain things of this, or running mechanics, or just some of these other things. Like, there's none of that involved. Like, again, it's just like doing the same thing over again. It's like bench pressing 7 days out of the week and then doing a max day one of those days every week for months on
Right.
end.
Right. Well, like you said, Mike, before that, like strength training should be like there should be a strength training season, right? But more importantly, like there then needs to be a maintenance thing of like, what are we doing during the season, right? But also, like you said, we're filling the buckets. So what are you doing, Erica, with the athletes that are in season for 8 months or more, and they're doing strength training on the field, and there's no weights, by the way, but they're doing strength training on the field, and then they come to see you? What bucket are you trying to fill with them? How do you handle that?
I'm just trying to fill what they're not getting within those practices and games. So in-season strength is a big one, just to maintain everything we work so hard for in the off season. So we're doing very quick lifts. We're probably going no longer than like 30 minutes, including like the warm up and the mobility exercises. We're just hitting each muscle group and then moving on with our lives.
Yep.
And really making sure after those lifts, they should never be sore. They can do them before practice. They can do them after practice. I wouldn't really do them like for a game or a day of a game, just to kind of give them that day off beforehand. But yeah, usually like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are some good days to do all that. And then I also like to do in-season speed at least once a week. And we're really just trying to keep them explosive and do a lot of like hops and bounds, just like low rep, but high intensity, long rest. And then still giving them those 30-yard, 40-yard top end speed sprints, but we're only doing just a couple of them. So again, after those workouts, they're never feeling sore at all. And it's so crazy. And, I just love seeing this for athletes who still train in season. Their parents will say, man, they're outrunning everyone right now.
Yep.
And I'm like, it's simple. They're continuing to get that speed and explosive stimulus that no other girls are making the time to do in season. A lot of girls in season will wither away, and the first thing that's going to go is your twitchiness, and then the second thing that's going to go is your strength. So, I tell them, look, I'm not surprised they're killing it. It's awesome. Like, just keep setting the example, and hopefully people follow.
Well, kudos to you for convincing them that it doesn't need to be a 90-minute session. It doesn't mean we don't have to include conditioning. I don't need to see you sweat in the workout to prove that you had a hard workout. Like, you're coming in here, you're filling a bucket. That bucket may mean that we're only doing 30 minutes and then bye-bye, you're out of here, but to be able to do that and then see that transition to the field, then just reifies like what you're doing with them, reinforces what you're doing with them, so.
Yeah, I will say with the in-season stuff. So yeah, I try to educate people as much as possible. I have a great core group that does it the whole year, but of course there's going to be people who are just like, we're too busy, we can't do it. And I'm done trying to like really push these people. And especially like the girls who are on like their school team and club team, I'll tell parents, look, I don't like that they're on two teams in the single season. Like, here's what could happen. Don't be surprised if a nagging overuse injury occurs. Like, I would prefer they come to me at least once or twice a week and get rid of one of those teams. And yeah, they usually just go on their own way, or they ask, well, can they be on those two teams and come to you once a week? And I'm like, well, they might not get that much out of what I'm doing at that point, because they're
Right.
going to be so tired and their muscles are going to be so broken down. It's like, are they really getting a lot out of that one session a week with me? I'd
Right.
only recommend it for a girl who's like kind of like new to lifting and just wants to use that time of once a week to like learn the movements. But for anyone who's like, well, we really want to improve speed and strength during this time while we're on two teams, I'm like, not going to happen. Like, you're
Gotcha.
not going to
Yep.
get
Yep.
anything out of one
Nope.
session. Like, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Nope. Nope. Yeah. One time a week doesn't cut it. You got to make the dedication. So give up the team, get into the weight room,
Yeah.
give up one team, get in the weight room. I mean, it's just, unless you don't want the improvements, but like you can't sit there, ask me for the advice. I give you the advice and then you go and do what you want. And that's, Mike and I feel the same frustration that you have, is that we have these conversations. The parent looks you in the face, they nod their head, and then, next week they're like, well, where were you? Oh, well, we took her to practice. She had, both. And you're like, okay, well,
Yeah.
that hour conversation that I just had, like that went out the window. So
Yeah.
And
I
it's
mean,
okay. You can't convince everyone, but the
exactly.
athletes who do stick around, they get results. The parents are happy, they're happy, I'm happy, and it is what it is. And if that's only like 3 or 4 people, then cool.
Then so be it. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, I mean, and that's what makes up that elite and that high level. I mean, you look at the percent that makes that high level, and they're the ones that are dedicated to the right things. The one that are almost kind of drinking the juice and getting caught in all this are the ones that don't make it out. It's almost like survival. It's like, who could just climb to the top of like a massive amount of people trying to climb the same pillar, The one with the best strategies will kind of get there. But I am finding that I'm having more parents that are kind of coming in and saying, like, we have a lot that do have to pay out of pocket for certain things. Some of these insurance companies won't even cover this. They're like, oh, she can get off the toilet. She's good. So I mean, they don't value like this performance end for these kids, and so they have to pay out of pocket. But the parents are saying, look, like, this is for him or this is for her. They don't want to do it. I'm not bringing them anymore. And sometimes they're tired of fighting with them. So, this is going to kind of be a two-part question for you is, how do you deal with strategies of working with maybe, some of them are not motivated. I've had parents ask me, what can we do? Because I give them stuff to do. They're not going to do it at home. They're not motivated. And I get it. Like, at the same time, we're dealing with a 12, 13-year-old, and this is all new. Now I'm taking them from their sport. They're coming back from an injury, and I'm telling them they have to do all these movements and all these things that they're not fun, and no one has ever exposed that to them. But I can't weight up and put load on a lunge or a squat when there's no spine control. There's no hip and pelvis control. So we work on just like cleaning up the movement first, and then show me you could do it with body weight, and then let's do it with BFR on high volume, and let me see how your form takes with a lot of volume and fatigue. And if you go right through it, then we'll increase, with reps, sets, weight, or whatever, and then all that. Like, I can't progress running if we don't even have foundational things here, because then we're just reinforcing, the poor mechanics, and that's what we see. These coaches have them run, 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 and all they're doing is just survival mode, harder, harder until something breaks. Where if we dial it back and we train those mechanics, and then we go from there, that's how we train running. But how do you deal with athletes that come in and like they're not motivated to do it, or they're going to complain, I don't want to be here, I don't want to do this. Like, what are you doing to deal with that? And then even just some of these younger, like a 10 to 12-year-old, what do you do when you come to training with them?
I explain to my athletes the process they need to go through. So I always say, like, you have to be able to graduate onto the next step. So just like 5th grade, you got to get through and then go on to 6th grade. Like, you have to do a certain level of math to progress to the next level. So like my girls know that like things as boring as like A skips and high knees for my older girls, where we're constantly going over sprint mechanics, they understand, okay, like I need to refine this skill and practice it as much as a soccer ball. Like, speed is as advanced of a skill as like doing like a scissors move or having a good first touch. So I try to like relate it to soccer for them. And I tell them, look, like the cool stuff you see on Instagram, we're going to do like every now and then. the majority of our training is actually like the boring stuff no one sees on the internet. And I always relate it to real life. I mean, if you think about your life, most of the time, life is pretty mundane. It's very rare you're out there doing margaritas on the beach or flying to Tulum. I just had my wedding, which was one day. It was an absolute fairy tale. It was magical, but that was one day out of my entire life. That happens from time to time. That happens every so often. Those like magical experiences, like your wedding or
great analogy.
Traveling somewhere exotic. And it's like, you have to find a way to be excited about the boring, mundane things in life. Otherwise, you are not going to make it. You're not going to make it in your sport. You are going to fail at your relationship or marriage. You are going to fail at your career, or if you go to medical school or academics, like you have to put in the work. And I'm just really honest with athletes. Like life is not like this like grandiose thing. It's 95% of the time boring as heck.
Yeah.
But Instagram is telling these kids otherwise. I mean, especially for female athletes, you see influencers flying the world, like sipping champagne in Italy, on the beach posing, like living their best life. And I'm like, guys, this is not real life. And most of them went viral for posting a half-naked picture. So do you really want to live that life? Like, sorry, I said it on air, but it's true.
No,
and like,
this is stuff we want you to say. This is absolutely.
They fall prey to all that nonsense. A lot of girls get very sucked into the internet nonsense, whether it's training or like lifestyle or even like health and nutrition nonsense.
And this is the direction we're going in society. We want every day to be that wedding. I mean, they do it with the NFL. We got football now, Monday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Like it's just nonstop entertainment all the time. Games. And you're right. There is no time to build that foundation. We're constantly trying to build, this beautiful house on our foundation that's not settled, and it keeps breaking. We keep patching it here, patching it there. So you're right, and that's what I think they drive after. It seems like every day they want the boom, boom. So they come in and like, what are we doing today? When are we going to do ball work? When are we going to do this? I'm like, you're not touching the ball until you could do a lateral shuffle without your hips being all over the place. Like, and I just know that you're trying to protect them because you know that it's hard. It's a long process when they're dealing with an injury, especially like an ACL. You don't want that re-tear. And Joe and I say it all the time, just like one more month of refining skills can really prevent you from, just because it's like a split second that ACL goes again. And there you go. Now we're in this boat again. Is it really worth it?
Are you guys finding a lot of girls being rushed back in rehab nowadays?
Well, I would say yes to that, but because now with Mike and us really understanding this and having the objective data, I think that we're getting a hold of some of them to buy into it. But I would say for the most part, Mike, let me know if you agree. I'd say by the 9-month mark, these kids are chomping at the bit. They're breaking their parents, stones about getting back. And, and then the parents get the pressure from the kid that they want to play now. And so I'd say by the 9-month mark, you better have the reins on really tight because you're going to have, that's where the ride begins.
And when we bring on other specialists like surgeons, and they talk about stuff about how the sensory fibers of the ACL graft don't even fully mature and adhere into the bone till about a year mark, that proprioception is off. And they've tested athletes where they have them just standing. And they've done this with even Kyler Murray. We had a surgeon on talking about that. His quads are massive, but still the one was a little smaller than the other. And they've done just having them stand on force plates, and they will still naturally not put weight just subconsciously on the involved side. So there's a lot of, neurocognitive things that we do. We have a really cool piece of equipment called the Quick Board that we use to train some of that. So there are advancements and things to try to, retrain these skills because we're noticing a lot of deficits. But, what we're noticing is that on two perspectives, that with some of the PT, there's a lot of places that they're not even doing the right things from week one. So kids are not progressing and doing the right stuff. It's very outdated. This is a specialty area, and you see there's a lot that goes into it, or even just any of the injuries that go on, anything, just, back pain, ankle sprains. There is unfortunately a lot of outdated rehab. So when they come out, excuse me, they basically don't have the right, foundation. And the parents come in, they'll say someone like Joe, we just spent 8 months in PT. What do you mean we can't do the sports performance stuff now? But what we're trying to do in our company is building out a little bit of a hybrid thing. And this is something that Joe and I came up with too, is a PT and strength coach hybrid, where if I'm working on these things, why can't they work together with a strength coach and work upper body? Or when we get to that point, I'm still working on some fine tuning things with this, but they could maybe fine tune some of their, running mechanics, or do some of these like cardio sessions, rowing, assault bike, other stuff like that. Like the movements that they have the boxes checked off, that they've graduated those stepping stones, and the things they're not good with. Okay, maybe like their squat's not great still. Well, then we're not doing any back squats or front squats yet, but we're really good with like hip hinging or lunge patterns. Okay, you could work that with the strength coach. PT still cleans this up. Now we have this hybrid. So there's things that they're working on, and there's certain skills that maybe they could do, or things they could do with the, sport specific with the trainer. Like you could do these ball drills and these passing drills, but this type of stuff, you're just not ready yet. So that's where we understand the lanes. I don't know. Do you do anything like that, Erica, with where you're at?
So that's really interesting, like about the year mark, how they're still not
Yep.
physiologically ready. Have you guys heard of Carmen Bott? She's mainly on Twitter.
Okay.
Okay.
But she talks a lot about ACL rehab, and we've had some conversations as well, but I just like the idea of adding in that strength coach to make sure that they are working on being ready to sprint again, since
Yeah.
the injuries tend to happen at the high velocity movements. And the one biggest thing in rehab that I've heard girls say they weren't prepared for was that sprinting, and then the level of conditioning that was happening in their game. So all
Bingo.
those running demands. And sometimes it's not a PT's fault, because the insurance runs out,
Yes.
and then
Correct.
parents are like, okay, well, like the surgeon cleared us to play, but like
Yeah.
we haven't really run yet, so we'll just kind of like, jog a lap around the track week one, and
Mm-hmm.
then maybe go 3 laps the other way. I'm like, that's not how you train to
Yeah.
condition to
Yeah.
step on the field again. And a lot of people are winging that return to play conditioning and speed. And I wonder if that's why a lot of the re-tears are occurring as well. Have you
I
guys seen
I
that?
would say, I don't even want to cut you off, because I'm
Yeah.
listening to you say it, and I'm like trying to answer it, because that is the exact thing that Mike and that was where I think that I started to get a lot of these kids coming, because they saw that I was putting a ball at their foot, and I saw, but they were coming in thinking that that was the first thing they were getting to do, and I'm like, you're not ready for what they're doing yet, but this is what you need before you go back to practice, right? I saw one of the surgeons write like a return to participation, return to play, like what it should look like. Okay. And what I've said was like, that's great, but like, like when you go to your surgeon for your final visit, you sit on a table, and we've had surgeons literally tell us this, so I'm not making this up. Like they check the integrity, maybe you stand up, maybe you hop on it once. You didn't hop on it after being taken through a fitness test that we take you through, and hitting you with a ball and putting you on the quick board and having you, do lunges, and like we put you through a rigorous fitness test.
Yeah.
And then these are what your sessions look like. So these are your practices before you actually get to practice, because we want that to be easy. Just like when you practice, we want you to practice hard so that the game is easy, right? So, and I
Mhm.
agree with you 1000% that that's probably 90% of why these kids are re-tearing it, is because, you know, Mike, his ego is checked at the door. Mine is checked at the door. We understand our lanes. A lot of PTs want to continue to do more of this
Mhm.
because hey, maybe they don't have confidence in a strength coach in their area. So they're like, all right, well, we'll keep them. Okay, fine. But you're not really skilled to do that. Your skill really comes in with, right after surgery. And I'm not, disrespecting anyone that has a CSCS. That's fine. You may have that, but how often are you actually using that if you're a PT, right? Like we're using it as strength coaches. We use it daily. We use it every day. We program design every single day. Physical therapists don't necessarily do that. And I think that is where, like, when we put these kids through some of the stuff that I put them through, this harder than some of the practices that they've even been through.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the kids are like looking at me like, like they're pale and they're like laying on the turf. And I'm like, that's a training session.
Yeah.
Well, it
Now,
has to
again,
be
that's not a
harder.
training session at 6 months. That's a training session as we're in that return to play phase.
Right. Yeah, I like that. I'm just finding a lot of rehab programs aren't giving a hard enough stimulus
Yeah.
in that
Yep.
final phase. So then a kid's like shocked when they play their first game again and the knee goes out in that first sprint and then
Yes.
quick cut and they're like, whoa, I didn't do enough reps of this before this occurred.
Yes.
So yeah, it's definitely that lack of high velocity movements because
1000%.
insurance runs out, or some PTs are old school, unlike you guys, and they just don't know how to program the conditioning and the speed. So
Yep.
And that's what I explained. When I have them do a 30-30-30 BFR split squats and they're like, my legs are shaking. I'm like, well, what do you think's going to happen when you go into a tournament? Like, you have to create that resiliency. Like,
right.
but they've never been exposed to this before, so they don't get it. And they think it's punishment. I have kids say, I hate the quick board. I'm like, you don't like it because it shows you where you're not as good as you thought you were. And I'm like, the quick board is making you focus on multiple things and move your feet. That's what soccer is. That's what field hockey is. What basketball is. Like, you do it all the time, but now you're being challenged out of something you don't like, but that's how you get better. And if you're really high level or you really want to go back to the sport and play at this level you were saying you were, then if you're the strongest and fastest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. So you have to be challenged. Like, that's why pro athletes seek each other out on off seasons and they train with each other, because they get exposed and that's how they get better. But they just don't have that. And you're right. There's a lot of PTs that they're not doing that. And then when you get to, they don't have the facilities built out, because the things are changing now. But in order for facilities to have this type of stuff, most of them don't. They're just old, stale, or dingy. And I'm like, that's not a sports performance facility.
Yeah.
Our company, thankfully, is recognizing that. And we're trying to build more of that because we see the need for this. But, I mean, Joe and I got this idea to kind of spark, almost like these high intensity interval trainings, stuff of like, where it kind of stemmed off of almost like CrossFit, Spartan Race, DecaFit, High Rocks, where it's time under tension, nothing has to do with your sport, but you're training the muscle groups and the cardiovascular type taxing that you would to simulate what you'd be in your sport. And then we could do sport specific after. So I might put somebody through like 5 rounds of just simple movements of cardio strengthening, and then after that we're going to work some jump and lands. I'm going to hit you with the ball, and I want to see what that leg looks like when you land on it, because that's going to happen at the end of a tournament when you go to cut and pivot and you're tired.
Yeah.
What happens there? So but I was going to segue into this because we really want to talk about the nutrition, because this is the other piece. We're talking about exercise and all this stuff, but there's this other big piece that none of that matters without the nutrition. So Erica, can you please talk about the nutrition? I'm pumped about this.
Where do I begin with this one? So
Water.
be prepared to unlearn a lot of what you've learned.
Yeah,
okay. Well, it's great because we've had a couple different nutritionists on, so I'd love hearing. Let's see if things are aligned or see if things are completely different. So yes, let's hear it.
Yeah. So I'm very particular with the RDs that I follow nowadays, because when it comes to a girl's hormonal and just overall health, we do need to put that first. And when we actually do put that first, her performance thrives physically and mentally. So I really like Cynthia Monteleone. She's also a world record breaking track athlete. She's almost 50 years old. She basically looks 30. She's amazing, and she practices what she preaches. She's also a metabolic practitioner and nutritionist and a mom to girls. So she does it all. I also really like Michelle Hearn. She's a registered dietitian who's an ultra marathon runner. So those are like the few that I really like. And personally for me, like, I look back on my playing career, and in high school, my nutrition was terrible. Like, I was getting away with like so much like ultra processed food, super like high sugar. I was very protein deficient. I was very omega-3 fatty acid deficient. I definitely wasn't hydrating enough. And sure, I got away with it, but I was a naturally good athlete, so I could for a while. And I can't help but look back on that time, like, how much better could I have felt mentally and emotionally because I wasn't feeling that great, but physically I was performing awesome. And then at Johns Hopkins, I started to take my nutrition a little bit seriously since the competition was getting a lot harder. And it was my junior year, I realized, whoa, I like drank way too much alcohol my first few years. Like this really like made me super like inflamed and like retaining a lot. And like I just wasn't feeling good. Like I felt like sluggish and like tired. My sleep wasn't good. My focus in academics wasn't great. It like affected everything. So I cut back on that. I also cut back on a lot of like high sugar, ultra processed foods. So I started to do like more whole foods, like chicken, turkey sandwiches, potatoes. So it definitely got a lot better. But then in my late 20s, I started to realize like I was having some severe hormonal issues, and I was having like very like painful periods. PMS was really bad. Like mood swings were terrible. Sleep wasn't great. And I was experiencing this for a while as a kid and an adolescent, but I didn't like realize it. I just like was kind of like ignoring it. But in my late 20s, I had nothing else to think about but my health because I was a retired soccer player. So I started to look at becoming more animal and meat based and really upping that. I was very protein deficient, which was probably why my mood was so bad and my periods were so painful. My muscles were always sore and I just didn't feel like strong. So I had to like really up that. And then another thing that I increased that was like the game changer for everything was upping my fats. And this one I'm so bitter about because I feel females have been lied to about fats their whole lives.
Yeah.
Back then, like we were having like skim milk and low fat cheese and reduced fat this and reduced fat that. And like I did that for many, many years, but it's no wonder my mental health wasn't great because fats are needed for brain function because the brain is made up of over 60% fat. So you definitely need to nourish it with those fatty acids like DHA and EPA and even saturated fat as well. If people still think saturated fat is bad, then they've definitely lived under a cave for 20 years. You can look at the research online. You can follow all the medical doctors that are talking about the benefits of saturated fat, but especially for mental health as well as female hormones, we really need those fats. We also need cholesterol because our sex hormones like progesterone and estrogen are both derived from cholesterol. So it's really important we have like single ingredient fats like fish, eggs, fatty meats and red meat and butter and lamb and avocado and all the healthy oils like avocado, coconut oil, olive oil. Like these are all so good for us women, but we've been told that fats aren't good for us and we need to eat low fat diets. And partly because a lot of girls think that fat makes them fat, but it really doesn't. It's never like a single factor that makes you fat. There's like other things involved. I mean, we can talk about too high sugar.
I mean the Diet Cokes and the processed carbs, you know?
Right. Yeah. And you know, I think nowadays there is like this like over glorification of the carbs. I'm not saying you need to go ketosis, not at all. But I think a lot of female athletes are having too many carbs at the expense of protein decreasing and fat decreasing. So they're prioritizing something because they think that's like what they need the most. And then they're severely protein and fat deficient. And for that reason, that's why they're suffering mental health issues. 1 in 4 girls have depression and anxiety, or I think it's like over 40% of female athletes say that they have some sort of menstrual cycle disorder. So whether that's irregular periods or cysts on their ovaries, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, or they've had a missed period for years and they don't know why because they think that they're being healthy. And I'm sure you guys have heard this too. Girls will say, well, I'm eating so healthy with my salads and my seeds and my twigs and my juices, but no, you're not. You don't have enough protein. You don't have enough fat. And it's no wonder you have a missed period. So it's really important to up the proteins and fats and strategically work in the carbohydrates. That's why I really like Cynthia and Michelle Hearn, because they time it right with the athletes that they work with, like later in the day when they have training. So they're not constantly going through this like glucose roller coaster. I'm sure a lot of adolescent girls would have much more stable moods throughout the day if we maybe cut back on some of that and they increase their protein and their fat, because they're much more mood stabilizing. And I mean, our girls, like, I just want them to feel amazing, because now it's like I don't have painful periods anymore. I have a very stable mood. I wake up every day with so much energy, and I don't have 300 grams of carbs a day. Cynthia's athletes don't have that, and they're breaking world records. Michelle Hearn's as well. And I think the carb recommendations now are so astronomically high. We're wondering why girls are getting these menstrual cycle disorders and they're having these mental health issues. And if you really want to learn more, I highly recommend you listen to OBGYN Jamie Seaman, Dr. Jamie Seaman, also Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. So a lot of this information is coming from female medical doctors who are discussing nutrition impact on hormones. And I wrote in my new book, Female Athlete High Performance, once girls have hormonal balance, that's when sports performance becomes unlocked.
Mm.
That's
I
great.
believe I just heard a podcast with Gabrielle. She was on Gary Brecka.
Yeah.
Talking about,
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, that's why I know. Do you have any other things on the nutrition that you want to ask?
Yeah, okay. Would you be able to maybe run through like an example of like what an athlete could do during the day? Because I know a lot of the talk about nutrition, but you know, these kids don't really know like how to eat like throughout the day, or like what are good options. So do you have some examples of like what maybe some of your girls you'd recommend on like what to do and when to eat it, or like I have PT right now, or I have like a session training, like what should I eat? Like I got it in an hour, and then what do I eat after? Maybe some examples there to help them guide. And then obviously, people have their dietary, restrictions, they have allergies and stuff, but at least some examples to kind of give them a thought process.
It's going to be different for everyone, so I can't give like one like example of
Mhm.
meals and amounts throughout the day. But Cynthia Monteleone recommends you absolutely have to eat breakfast. Like don't don't skip breakfast, because that sets you up for the day. It gives you energy to focus in school and then be good for after school practice. So girls definitely have to eat breakfast and make sure they're always eating enough. So not eating enough is also a reason why a lot of girls do miss their periods or have irregular periods. So eating breakfast, it has to be very, very protein forward, and also fat forward as well. Cynthia toys with like the carbohydrate content in that breakfast, which is why like I can't really talk about too much since she's not here. But it's definitely like, as an example, if you're a girl who's eating like just one egg for breakfast, that's not enough protein. So one egg is 6 grams of protein. You want to aim for definitely over 20 grams of protein. Cynthia and I like to recommend at least 30 grams of protein a meal, because that way girls are really allowing their muscles to build and repair. So first and foremost, they're not going to have chronic muscle soreness. So their recovery is going to be great. And that's amazing, especially with all the demands they're playing year round. I mean, if you can get that right, you'll be able to withstand this year round nonsense way more. So definitely protein forward, at least 30 grams. And then making sure that you have some fats, because fats can also be an energy source as well. So maybe adding like butter into your eggs or enjoying that bacon. I mean, how enjoyable is that? Like to have that for breakfast. And it's also like, it's so like satisfying. Like you don't have to like have this terrible relationship with food where you're constantly like hungry and like thinking about your next snack or your next meal. Like if you have that really nutrient dense, like animal-based protein, fat, and a little bit of carbs for breakfast, like you are going to be set through the day and you're not even going to be thinking about it. You're just going to be going through your day productive, feeling great. And it's just amazing. And I want that for all girls. And then lunch, again, same thing, about 30 grams of protein there. And then dinner as well. And I know schedules are busy, but I really think like anyone can take time on a Sunday when you're done your Sunday game, you're getting ready for the week. You can take at least an hour to meal prep for the week and set yourself up for success, because that's what high performers do to get an edge. And if you really want to have vibrant health, you have to be disciplined and you have to be prepared. So I always say, like, opt for these like single ingredient whole foods first. So single ingredient, like a salmon's a salmon, an egg is an egg. There's not much nonsense in it. So opt for those first, because they are the most filling and they're the most nutrient dense. But of course, if you're at a tournament, traveling, I don't want girls to like go into like the Wawa gas station and be like, oh my gosh, like that food has ingredients in it. Like, we're not going to get that. And like, they don't eat. Like, that's a problem. You still have to make smart choices when you're at a tournament, or pack a cooler. Bring your own stuff. Bring your own cooler. But if you find yourself not prepared because you just forgot and you're at the Wawa, they have great protein forward sandwiches and wraps. So even though it's quote unquote processed, you can still get your macros and enough calories so you're not depleted. So I don't want girls to totally be scared of food and has to be perfect all the time. You can make so many smart decisions on the road. I mean, Starbucks has amazing egg bites. I get 4 orders of those because 2's not enough. And even Wendy's burgers are like, I think they're either grass-fed, which is surprising, something like that. Buffalo Wild Wings cooks their wings in
peanut oil. Oh, tallow.
Tallow or like lard, which is a really vitamin D rich fat, and vitamin A and E and K and all these great fat soluble vitamins. So even Buffalo Wild Wings, you can find good options. Or if you're at Outback Steakhouse with the team, get extra chicken on that pasta, or get that steak with that sweet potato. I mean, these are all yummy, filling foods, and it doesn't need to be this complicated lifestyle.
And it's not like we're eating this day in and day out. You're at a tournament. You need that fuel. So get it, processed. It's not like we're eating processed, 365 days out of the year. We're doing it one time. You'll be fine. It's just,
Yeah. And,
but something is better than nothing. And that's, gotta fuel the tank somehow.
And even with like the hydration, like a lot, I prefer element hydration because it has such a high sodium, magnesium, and potassium content, and it tastes good and I feel great on it. But if I'm at a tournament and I forget to put my element packs in my soccer bag, I'm still going to buy the Gatorade, even though like I don't do well with the sugar, but like I need the electrolytes to get the hydration. So I don't want girls to like be scared and to like not get that hydration or nutrition if they forget to pack and prepare. Try to pack and prepare as best you can, but fed is better than not fed.
What would you say to a female athlete who is just continuing to be stubborn about the nutrition? They keep talking about wanting to get back, tournaments, they want to go to practice, all this other stuff. Every time you try to talk about the nutrition stuff and they're just so focused on the sport, what would you say to that athlete if they're just totally neglecting the nutrition?
So I was stubborn when I was a teenage girl as well. I never wanted to eat my vegetables, which, I look back and I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of was innately right about that one. But I still hate vegetables. But no, I was stubborn. And I think sometimes it takes time for girls. I think coaches and parents can like continue to deliver that messaging of like what they should eat to perform and why it's beneficial. And it should be a weekly, if not monthly conversation, just so that they get it in their head. And then eventually they'll come around. It might take a year, a few years. It might take until college, like myself and my late 20s, when I had like drastic health issues. I think sometimes girls or young women reach a rock bottom in their health or performance, and it leads them to going down the rabbit hole of, okay, what foods are causing a reaction in me? What am I really deficient in? And that's when people make a change. And it sucks that people make a change when something bad happens, but that's just the reality of it. And it happened to me, but I'm grateful it did, because I'm 34 now and I feel way better than I did when I was an all-American athlete at Johns Hopkins at age 21. Crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. And everyone's like, you don't look 34. I'm like, oh, thank you. Like, I love that. But it's so powerful, and food is medicine. And we'd be lying to girls if we told them, hey, like have these processed snacks every day. You know, we'd be lying to them. And I think a lot of RDs are just trying to coddle people and please everyone. But I think we need to be hard on our girls, because when we look at the statistics with the menstrual disorders and the mental health issues in kids, we can't ignore that processed and high sugar foods do play a role. Yes, have them from time to time. You're not going to die if you have Christmas cookies or Halloween candy like once a year, or you go to an ice cream outing with your team once a week. Like, you're not going to die. Don't be fearful. But it's that chronic everyday consumption of these snacks that sets these girls up for failure. And I don't think enough people in our industry are being hard enough on girls and really putting health first.
That's an awesome message.
Yeah.
What about how about female athletes in understanding your body and the way you're going to present yourself as an athlete is going to be different than some of these images like you might see on Instagram or whatever, that there is a certain, form you're going to have when you're competitive versus not. I mean, even the same thing, bodybuilders are going to look much different than, a football player or a soccer player for that reason, but because there's performance versus, just aesthetics. Can you touch on that?
Well, that's another great thing about the nutrition lifestyle. I don't call it a diet, the lifestyle I talk about, because you will not only always feel full and get the nutrients you need for your hormonal, mental, and physical health, but you will feel good in your body, because a strong, athletic, lean, muscular body composition is a byproduct of that nutrition lifestyle. And I'll tell another story. So I got a DM from a girl who told me that she hasn't had her period in 2 years. And I asked her, I'm like, well, what are you eating? And she said, oh, well, mainly like salads and like lean chicken breast and low fat this and that. And I was like, that's the first problem. Like, make sure you're eating enough first, but you, girl, you need to really up your protein, up your calories and all of it. And then she asked me, she's like, well, like, you look so athletic and lean. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really like try. Like, I work out maybe like 4 times a week for 15 minutes in and out. And she was like, what? How are you able to do that? Yeah. And I'm like, I don't kill myself. I don't over exercise. I walk my husky for 30 minutes a day. Like, I chill. But she was like, what are you eating? And I told her, I was like, well, I'm eating at least 2 pounds of meat a day, red meat. And she was like, what? She was like,
Wow.
she was like, how are you not like huge and bulky? And I'm like, because like that type of protein builds your muscle and just makes your body composition like robust. And she couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe it. And then another thing, this is kind of like off topic. She was like, now I understand why you don't get Botox, because you have a ton of protein and collagen. I'm like, heck yeah, that's
Bingo.
why.
Yep.
Wow, look
Yep.
at that.
So if you have that
Wow.
nutrition, it literally covers a broad range of like every body image health issue that a girl has, which is why I'm so passionate to talk
That's our
about it.
hot take right there, Mike. That's going
Yeah.
on. That'll be the Instagram. That'll be the hot take.
But
Yeah.
I'm passionate.
Protein.
I want this for every girl,
Yep. That's
because
awesome.
it benefits so many aspects of your life.
Yep.
And it just makes me sad that girls are not getting the nutrients that they need. And it doesn't need to be complicated. It really
Misinformation,
doesn't.
just like the whole ACL process, and
Yeah.
it's a shame, because like we just, we had someone on last week and we talked, there's so much information now, and now it's it's not misinformation, it's so much information, and now you're trying to figure out like, okay, well, are they lying, or are they telling, like, like which one actually makes sense now? So as a a young teenager, yeah, you're on your phone all the time trying to and you can research things, but it's how did we get that information to them? So what are some ways that, I mean, do you like hold workshops? Do you do webinars for parents? Like, how are you actually getting to the source, right? They're the ones that are paying for the training. They're the ones that are paying for the the soccer teams and things like that. So they're the ones we need to talk to. How are you talking to them?
Well, I have my podcast, and I know a lot of parents really like listening to podcasts
Yep.
nowadays because they're like in the car or out walking, or they're like busy cleaning the house. So I really like to stay consistent with the podcast and
Mm-hmm.
have these people on, like these female RDs and medical doctors who are talking about these things and debunking all these lies women have been told for all these years. So I'm trying to have like really interesting people on and really educational people, and just getting that out there as much as I can. I personally do a lot of like presentations, whether that's in person or on Zoom. Recently, I just gave a presentation at the Strength and Conditioning Convention last month, and there were a lot of female coaches in the audience who were, and it was on the menstrual cycle and nutrition. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
female coaches in the audience were shocked of what I said. And again, at the end, they came up and kind of confided in me. And one girl said, "Hey, I have PCOS. Hey, I haven't had a period in 2 years. Hey, my health is like this." And I'm like, try this stuff out and just watch your health thrive.
Yeah.
And they're just like, "Wow, thank you so much." Because like I have never heard any of this before, and I thought I was being healthy, but clearly my health is suffering and my menstrual cycle.
That's incredible. Which,
Yeah.
by the way, that was perfect because I was literally trying to figure out how am I segueing it because we're using up a lot of valuable time here. So I know that I want to get this in, and that kind of leads us into that segue of the menstrual cycle
Mm-hmm.
and the ACL injuries. And I'd say the original time that we were trying to get you on, maybe 6, 8 months back in September, I had done a poll on the parents of the ACL page because I was curious. It wasn't about me saying one way or the other. I'm a male, right? So I'm just trying to gather information and try to figure this out because as these kids are coming in to see me now, part of the health history that I'm asking them, and I make sure that their parents are there because it can be a little, a touchy of a subject, especially as a male asking a female. But I did a poll on the ACL page and asked, were they on, were the females that injured their ACL or tore their ACL, were they on their period or were they on some, part of that cycle when that was happening? So I was going down this deep dive where like, this was it. Like, this is probably one of the bigger reasons. And I come to find out that as I did the poll, it actually was skewing the other way. And then I started to do research because I wanted to ask you these things. And I went down this deep dive and went into some of these articles. And I was like, oh my God, it really has nothing to do with it. It's about how do we manage
Mm-hmm.
that cycle and what are we doing during that cycle? Maybe we're upping our proteins a little bit more, or maybe we're increasing our sleep. So let's kind of like dive into like understanding a little bit more and kind of debunk, help us debunk the menstrual cycle and ACL injuries.
Well, like you said, it is a rabbit hole, right? And it can become more confusing than it is helpful. And there's so much conflicting research, and there's studies that say that the luteal phase or the menstrual phase cause injury because there's fatigue or the sleep quality is not as good. And okay, yeah, like being fatigued and being sleep deprived can absolutely like cause an ACL injury. There's studies on that. But it still was really confusing, like which phase it was, because a few other studies said that it was the ovulatory phase, which is the opposite, where girls have the most energy and the most testosterone, but they are running at higher speeds. They're having like higher muscular output. So that can make sense too, because that's where injuries happen during those high velocity movements. So there's really no universal phase where girls are at a higher risk for ACL. But even if there were, even if we could say, okay, every single female athlete is at a high risk of ACL during her period, during the menstrual phase, what would we do? Like, would we not feel
Be
a
canceling
teeny,
games left and right.
yeah, like what would we do? And like, would we like tiptoe around it? Would we like cut back on things? So I think it's just more empowering to tell girls, okay, like you should be feeling pretty good throughout all phases. A lot of girls think that the luteal phase is terrible and PMS is like a normal thing, but you don't have to feel that. I'm proof of that. Cynthia is as well. Many other women have gotten rid of PMS symptoms altogether through nutrition alone. So I always tell girls, look, like focus on the basics. Your nutrition first and foremost, and just really making sure that you're having those omega-3 fatty acids since they are anti-inflammatory, and inflammation can be high during the luteal phase and the menstrual phase. So you want to make sure that you balance that out, get your fish, your omega-3s. But, you know, I would argue like have your fatty acids in your follicular phase, like have your omega-3 supplement every day for your brain. So I don't really like this whole idea of like periodizing period nutrition, because female athletes should just be getting nutrients daily year round. It shouldn't matter what phase you're in. You should still
Very
have.
similar to like the whole ACL. Like we're not doing ACL prevention. We're just doing
Yep.
good programming. So if
Yeah.
we are just good nutrition, it shouldn't be, well, I'm at this part of my cycle. I need to be doing this now.
I'll be
Just
honest.
do it all the time.
I'll be honest with you. I have no clue what phase I'm in.
Right.
And I
Right.
feel
How
the
many girls
same.
know what
I
phase
feel
they're in?
I feel the same as I did 2 weeks ago when I was in a different phase. High energy, sleeping great, no bloating, no indigestion, skin is clear. Yeah, like I don't really know what phase I'm in until obviously the menstrual phase, but it's just pretty steady. And I think girls are under the impression that those 28 to 35 days are this like volatile, like roller coaster, like it's crazy, but it doesn't have to be. And yeah, I mean, you can really take care of yourself and make some strides with good nutrition. And if girls are fueling properly, that's going to reduce risk of ACL because they have the energy availability, their muscles are recovering better. If they're sleeping well, that they're focused and they're motivated for their games. So yeah, I think we just need to focus on the basics. Sometimes I feel like I'm just selling common sense to people, but you know, everyone in our industry wants to complicate things, and too much science can really be bad science. And that was the first thing I said when I got on stage at the coaches convention. I was like, too much science is bad science. And if you guys think I'm here presenting on this revolutionary period tracking app that I just came out with, you're wrong. Get out of the room, because I'm just going to talk about simplicity today. And everyone was like, what is going to happen?
I'm quite mad that because I'm in Tampa, that I didn't get over to Orlando to see the presentation, because I would love to just see everyone's jaw drop like what? Like, not all science. Like too much science is too much. Yeah, it is. You know, like you just convolute everything. Like let's get back to the basics, like you said from the very beginning of this, and what the common theme is now with everyone that we speak to, like it's nutrition and sleep. Like strength training is very important, but if you're not doing the other two things that are that foundation, that true foundation, and it's your nutrition and your sleep, then the training falls apart anyway. And so you're doing it and you're thinking that you're making yourself better, but you're breaking your body down, because sleep helps you with the recovery, and so does the nutrition.
Do you use any like wearables, Erica? I mean, I've been using the Whoop strap for years, and I'm thoroughly impressed by their podcast. I think Gabrielle Lyons has actually been on theirs before. They bring on some really smart people, and it's all confirming all the stuff we're talking about. Even a lot of diseases and things that are going on with our society, we're losing track of the basics: sleep, nutrition. These are just small biohacks to optimize our health. And like people are walking around just like literally slowly dying. Well, I'm actually saying dying faster. I mean, people are falling apart by the time they're 40. They're just not doing the simple things.
So I don't use any like sleep tracking devices. I found with myself and a few of my friends and athletes that the device makes them anxious to get a good night's sleep, so they have trouble falling asleep. So I'm not completely sold on that right now. If you're someone who can just knock out and fall asleep, then use it, go for it. But most people, it is hard for them to fall asleep. But I think just coming back to the nutrition, if you get that right, then your hormones will be in balance, which means your sleep will be a lot more restful. So it's key to get that piece down. And a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, it is simple, but for female athletes especially, it is very empowering, especially around the menstrual cycle. I would rather tell a girl, hey, there's a lot you can control to have a healthy menstrual cycle, a regular menstrual cycle, a less volatile menstrual cycle. And that is the most empowering thing you can say, as opposed to, oh, well, you're on your period, you're going to sit out of this drill, or, oh, like you have like cramps, like, go, just go home. No, I want to empower you so you don't deal with cramps.
Right.
So yeah, again, I think a lot of people in the audience at that presentation were really like surprised, because when we thought we were empowering female athletes with all this menstrual cycle periodization and talk, we actually were disempowering them and causing them to be really reactive. And I want girls to become like super women, you know, like
confident,
I want you to
strong and confident.
Exactly. You can take control of your performance and your overall health. And man, I mean, what a world that would be, you know? Like it's crazy like what a lot of these girls are told. And even myself, like I was very disempowered with my menstrual cycle growing up, because I thought that I had to deal with these pains as a woman. Like I would be angry and be like, "Oh my gosh, like men have it way easier," and I would throw my fist in the air and like curse my own gender. But I also would say, "Oh, I am woman, hear me roar," but I'm complaining under the same breath that I'm a woman. So it didn't make any sense. And I was like, no, like I truly want to enjoy being a woman. Like I'm not going to complain anymore. I'm going to take charge of all this.
That's awesome. I mean, like we can literally sit here and go for 3 more hours. I am so, I'm just still like a little kid. I'm so excited that we were able to even get this to happen. I love the fact that everything you've been saying, like Mike and I just like pound our head against the wall and like talking to these kids about it. But every time we bring on somebody that has power like you do, it just helps us reinforce what we're saying, so that they know that we're not pulling these stats and these things out of the air, you know, arbitrarily, just because we want to punish you and we don't want you to go back to your sport and we need you to stay in rehab or in strength training. And, you know, like it's not about the money, right, Mike? I mean, we've said that before. It's
yeah. I mean,
honestly, it's not about that.
Kids.
It's about, I'm a parent, you know, I have 2 kids myself. Like I truly care about every single athlete that I work with, you know.
Yeah, I'm trying to get these athletes to move through the rehab better, because it makes me excited to see them progress. It makes me excited to see them hitting the weights and the reps and the sets and actually work out, not spending another session learning how to freaking do a lunge again, you know. But like there's these other things that limit that. The sleep, you didn't eat, you know, that maybe they are, you know, having a tough menstrual cycle because they're not balanced. And then they come in and they're dragging, oh, I'm tired, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. And it's like, your parents are paying good money for this. The clock is ticking. Do you want to get back on the field? Like, you know, I understand you're 16. You don't want to be spending your teenage years in a PT clinic. I don't blame you, but I'm trying to show you how to get your way out, and like you're making it really hard. So like, that's why bringing you on, Eric, is another voice to get them understand, like, just do this. Like you're going to love it in the long run. You're going to look back in 5 years and be like, man, I'm glad I listened, because look at where I am now, because we all are stubborn. I've been there. I had to fall hard and learn in my own competitive phases and stuff. And then you just look like, man, if I would have just done this, it's so simple. Yeah, I mean, just stop making it so hard for yourself. Like, it's
a lifestyle thing. You got to understand. Like Erica was saying before, like this is something, like she's now a retired soccer player, but like, so this happens when you're done playing. Like you continue to do this, and you're going to continue to have a real long life. And especially if you're coming off of a surgery, you really want to be eating this way, because like we've talked about, there's a whole generation that are going to be recognized by the scars on their knees, right? And guess what? We're going to probably have to reopen them in about 15 to 20 years and put a fake knee in, right? So we're getting I mean, that's the cold hard truth that a young teenager needs to hear, especially after a second ACL. Guess what? When you're Erica's age or when you're my age, like, you want to be playing with your children and your grandchildren, and you are going to probably have massive arthritis. If not, partial knee replacements, you're going to have full knee replacements. And why are we doing this? For what? Scholarships? For what? As a parent to say, like, my daughter or my son, plays for this. Like, I truly believe, and this will definitely piss off a lot of parents, that parents are trying to live through their children. And it's unfair because the mental piece to these kids is suffering. They got enough things going on. This isn't a woe is me for them. Every generation has their things going on. But this generation with having that, the COVID and having the access to cell phones and the internet and all that, it is different for a kid these days now. And that mental piece is so darn important. And why are we putting our children, it's borderline abuse when you're putting these kids back. Okay, so they want to. You're not necessarily forcing them, but maybe in the tone of your voice in the conversation that you're having, like, you don't know. Like, you don't know how you're, or you don't know if your child is listening to you talk to another parent about you. So I'm very hesitant about, and that's why I'm hard on the 12 months. You got to really be an outlier and show me in your numbers that you're ready to go before 12 months, but as far as an ACL surgery, you're not convincing me that you should go back before that. And guess what? Some of them should be closer to 15 to 18 months, but you're missing. We know what that does, God forbid you tell a sophomore that they're out for 15 months. There goes my scholarships. There goes this, like, how am I going to play? Like, I'll be a senior by the time I play again. Well, guess what? You have the rest of your life to do other things too, like at 24, 25, chances are you're not playing in the NWSL and you're working a sales job or you're working, a finance job or something, and you're not even doing this anymore, so let's put everything in perspective.
You have the rest of your life to live. I mean, exactly. That's kind of what my coworker and myself go through here. He created a system that we use. I mean, he was an Olympian. He was a Hall of Famer for rowing in the 90s. And he saw this. He saw that at the highest level, athletes were still breaking down and getting injured. And he's like, we got the best trainers in the world here. How are we Olympians and yet we're still getting injured? Something's not right. And it's because the human body and the mind is very good at compensating to get it done. And athletes do that very well, very good at compensating. You push to get it done. But when you train that compensatory pattern all the time, eventually it's going to break. So a lot of athletes will do that. They'll just push and push and push just to get to that peak. But what's the trade-off? You can't walk when you're 40. You have to have these surgeries. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that hard to have true athletic performance, especially like you said, Eric, we have all these resources. Now, like, I feel like athletes are going to be like cyborgs. Everything's going to be dialed in, and it's going to be the one that's going to compete the best is going to be the one that just has that little notch or just dialed in a little bit more. I mean, go look at all this, high-level sprinters. I mean, it's like a millisecond different. You look at NFL. These guys are all the same size. They're all beasts. Who's going to get to the ball faster? It's just everyone is so close, and we have all these things to dial in. We don't need to destroy our bodies to get there and have the performance. So I think all this knowledge gives people and empowers them to just be smarter about it, and you can have a happier life. Why do we have to live like this?
Erica, where can you have an incredible podcast. So how can people find you? Kind of give us all the platforms that you're on.
I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Fit Soccer Queen, and my podcast is only on YouTube, and it's just the Soccer Queens podcast.
The Soccer Queens podcast. Mike, where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Mike St. George. I'm on Instagram, the Honey Badger _ Juicy. We're gonna be making a clinic Instagram page, and that that's really where we're kind of putting the info out. And then we got the Coach Hos podcast co-host.
Yeah. You can find me at Coach _Hos on Instagram. You just put in Coach Hos in any search box. You're going to, find me with the podcast and Facebook page, things like that. Erica, we are definitely going to book you again to get you on here because there's probably 4 or 5 things that I have here. I just don't want to keep, going. Algorithm wise also, sometimes on YouTube, after I think 50 minutes, some of the podcasts don't get picked up as much either. So, but this better get picked up. This better, get tons of views, tons of listens, because this is ultra, ultra powerful. I cannot thank you again. We definitely, now that, we're only 2 towns away from one another, let's get together.
Yep.
I can certainly take you, show you the quick board and show you some of the wheeler technology that I'm using also. And, let's make that happen, but we'll get you on again. Thank you again so much for being on.
Yeah, thank you so
awesome.
much.
All right. Have a great weekend.
All right. Take care. Okay. Thanks.